and welcome you to opening day at Arion Press at Fort Mason. So this is our opening day program, and it comes kind of on the heels of a literary dinner that we did across the street on Thursday night. And with over 600 RSVPs for our opening day today, which will run from 2 to 5 here, the reception at Fort Mason has been absolutely incredible. We've been really thrilled. I'm Rolf Blythe. I'm the director of the press here. And it's been about 5 years since I took over from our founder, Andrew Hoyam. And what drew me to the press is probably what attracted a lot of you here this evening, which is just an interest in the magic of craft. In an age of mass production, what Arion is doing here, putting craft first, is a rarity, and it's exciting for us to be involved in. Over the last 50 years, every book that the press has produced has been, visually sophisticated, boundary pushing, beautiful, and most importantly, made by hand by a group of people with exquisite care. So as you kind of walk through our foundry or bindery or press room today during our open house, I always find that it's unique that an organization like this still survives, but we're in the really exciting position of not only surviving but thriving, and then that's thanks to you all. So today's program is a very special one. You'll have the opportunity to hear not only from Daniel Handler, aka Lemony Snicket, but also 7 of the 15 visual artists who participated in the creation of what we're calling the laureate edition of the Fables of Aesop, which coincides with the press's 50th anniversary. So the project itself that you'll be hearing about was about 2 years in the making. And we enlisted not just Daniel to write an introduction and sort of reposition the morals in a tone that's all his, but we also enlisted multimedia artist Kiki Smith to pay tribute to one of the fables on the exterior of the box. All in all, the project brought together about 36 artists and craftspeople. And for those who haven't seen the edition that's being displayed behind us in the flesh, downstairs at about 2 o'clock, we'll be welcoming everyone into Arion's gallery. It'll be on display. But also, and maybe more importantly, so will the work of the artists that you're to hear from tonight, who will be available for purchase, and the artists will be available to discuss. So the Aesop's Fables project, like all Arion titles, is limited to 250 copies. We still reserve 40 of those as deluxes, and the remaining 210 is what we call fine press subscriptions. And the way our subscription system works is we will do several books a year. This year it was 2 because we also made a major move to Fort Mason. But our 2024 books are Aesop's that you're about to hear about, and then Kindred by Octavia Butler with our work by Alison Sarr. So it's been an exciting year for us. Now onto our program. In a moment, we'll welcome Daniel Handler to the stage with 7 incredible artists whose work is featured in the project. Each artist was asked to respond to one of the fables of their choice, and a handful chose to respond to more than one. I'm sure the conversation around the projects can be amazing. We hope you'll enjoy it, and please give the project a look at our open house. Now I'll invite Arion's creative director and lead printer, Blake Riley, up just to introduce the artists and say a few words before the conversation. Sure.
Thank you. That was good.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, San Francisco. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. We found out just recently that by proclamation of Mayor Enrique, today is Arion Press Day in San Francisco. Very excited. The moral of that story is vote. As Rolf mentioned, we have 7 of the artists with us today out of the total 16. There are 8 women and 8 men in the collection. All total, there were 36 collaborators in the projects, from silversmiths to stone carvers that brought the project to life. So you'll get to see, a window into some of that. Maybe we can look at the side of Aesop. So this is maybe Aesop. No one really knows. No one, there is a person who is written about by that name, to whom the fables were attributed over time. Maybe he was a slave. Maybe he was from Africa. It's not very clear. Many of these fables cross borders. There's, quite a few of them are shared in the Indian storytelling tradition, and so they really have kind of circulated the globe. And it's kind of extraordinary that that they exist in our consciousness, right? Without there being a kind of one authorial voice. This is one of the very earliest printings of Aesop. Well, what's interesting about the project, particularly from a printer's point of view, is that the nature of the story is the fact that the fables are so short, and the imagery is so rich. It lent itself very early to depictions. So this is a beautiful edition from 1479, just 30 or 40 years after movable type was invented. And you can see the woodcut on the right. One of the most beautiful editions that we have researched, and in fact, you'll see. Remember this image because there are a number of artists today who worked in woodblock, and you can compare kind of this 550-year-old technique and interpretation to the artist's contemporary interpretation, particularly Audrey, Niffenegger, and Richard Wagener worked in woodblock. Second only to the Bible, it's purported that Aesop is the most published work in the Western world, and so you might wonder, why make another one? And there's several answers to that. Probably, foremost is that these are stories that connect all of us. Everyone has Aesop in them, and you may not even know it. They are so deep in the cultural consciousness that somehow we've lost the tie to the original. So. Necessity is the mother of invention, or do not count your chickens before they're hatched. Sour grapes. These are all expressions that get traced back to these stories, and that are kind of part of bring us into this storytelling community with each other. The other thing that we noticed, another reason for doing this is that the morals have changed over time. And this was kind of fascinating to find out. It became really the key into the insight, the key insight into the project was noticing that, originally, when you saw in the Verona edition, there weren't morals. That was an addition that came several hundred years later, and then they began to shift according to the cultural moment, let us say. And that became very interesting for us because all of a sudden we realized we could invite somebody to re-envision the morals for a contemporary audience. And so, in fact, we approached Daniel Handler, aka Lemony Snicket, whoever that is, we'll find out. To rewrite these morals, and through him, Daniel has helped point out just how truly strange and frankly messed up some of these stories are. You read them and they're really kind of odd in many places, but more than that, the morals can be pretty confusing. And let's take a look at how that works here with the ant and the grasshopper. Here's the story of the artist, the grasshopper musician, who has gone on his world stadium tour all summer. He's been gigging, and he comes back home, and yet no time to stock the refrigerator. So he goes and asks the ants, for some food for the winter, and they laugh at him. They're like, well, we've been streaming your music, on a live feed and not getting royalties all this time. Why weren't you, more responsible? And traditionally, the moral for this story was about laziness, that the grasshopper was somehow at fault for not doing their work. But you can see in Daniel's kind of translation, the grasshopper becomes the hero. Scorn your local artist, and you will end up joyless and stuffed. So we feel like, we're kind of correcting the record a little bit here. Now to kind of move on to introducing the artist, I just wanted to mention a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "Each age must write its own book, or rather each generation for the next succeeding." So here now is a glimpse of the book we've made and hope will be shared for generations to come. Today's panel artists, we're going to introduce them, and they're going to come out one by one in the order that they appear in the volume. So first out is Enrique Chagoya, a dear friend of the press, San Francisco artist, who's illustrated The Lion and the Mouse. This is originally ink on paper, ink drawing that we then separated into 4 colors and printed by relief. All of the artwork in the book is printed in the shop through a variety of different techniques. And when you when you go to the gallery, you'll be able to see them up close and see some of the different, different applications that were used. The next artist is Kenturah Davis. It's printed The Wolf and the Crane. This is a beautiful kind of a shadow puppet treatment of Kenturah's hands, and printed with this a pressure print technique. So it has quite a different feeling than some of the other images, but be sure to take a close-up look at that. Next is Natalie Frank from New York, who illustrated our edition of Edgar Allan Poe's stories of poems. And here with the cat and the Venus. It doesn't show in this image, but be sure to take a look downstairs that the eyes are actually kind of sparkling holographic images in the final print. This was an earlier rendition of that. And also, you'll be able to read the stories that go along with these in the gallery. Here we have Richard Wagener, The Gnat and the Lion. This is one of the wooden engravings that appear in the book. Beautiful detail. Richard is a friend that worked with us on our edition of Sea of Cortez and lives nearby in Petaluma. Audrey Niffenegger created the crow in the picture image. Audrey collaborated with us on a original text by Margaret Atwood called Mort the Smudgy. And here you see the pitcher dropping stones, the crow dropping the stones into the pitcher to be able to raise the water level up to be able to get a drink. What you can't quite see in the image, however, is that there is a translucent foil at the bottom that indicates the water level, so that it has a kind of an extra dimension that doesn't really appear on the screen. Next, Michele O'Connor created The Fox and the Grapes. And this is perhaps, Michele is the great challenge of the project by assembling an extraordinary collage of leaves and coconut husks and pulp paper. It was really a 3D kind of construction that she made that we then interpreted in a 7-color letterpress print, which is what you're looking at here. And finally, the final artist, Sandow Birk, with whom we've made a couple of projects. This is The Gnat and the Bull. I'd like to say that Sandow was the first artist of the 15 to dial the work in, so I appreciate that. And Sandow also worked on Tales of Oscar Wilde, and most recently our edition of Pooh, which is a retelling of The House at Pooh Corner, and that's in the storefront if you're interested to take a look at that. And finally, I'll introduce our dear friend Daniel Handler, aka Lemon Snippet. is glue that holds the project together, or perhaps you're the spicy salt that brought flavor to the whole. So thank you.
Thank you. That's sweet. Blake Riley, everybody. Good job. He works very hard with various machines that no one else is able to make function, and he makes beauty out of them. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I'm going to ask each artist a question, and then the artist will answer, and other artists will interrupt them, so I will have to work less than I planned. That's been my delight and privilege to work on this project, and one of the things that is so appealing about Aesop to me is that he lurks in our deep subconsciousness, that stories that we don't know are Aesop we have in our heads, and we don't know they're by Aesop, and they work on some level of literature that is beyond our understanding, and that is appealing to me. And of course, it was a lifelong dream to work with the people at the press. I'm always terrified to say the names of the press out loud because I'm afraid I'm either going to say Orion or Arion.
I love this.
Two things I don't want to say. And so in my head, I have a mnemonic, which is carry on, Arion Press, which is their motto, which I've offered to sell them and they have refused. Where should I begin? I think I'll begin with Richard. No, I'll begin with Michele. Michele, hello.
Hello.
It's lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, take your microphones to more people than me.
Well,
I will say that after this conversation, we'll have some Q&A, and then actually Michele and I are doing a special finale together.
hello.
That even those that carry on Press are not aware of. Hello. Do you remember when you first encountered Aesop? Because he is so invisible and his stories work so subconsciously. I like to wonder if anyone has a memory of it.
Absolutely. I think that in childhood, it was Grimm's fairy tales, Aesop's fables, and the 10 Commandments.
I've read those.
Nothing.
Also by a slippery author, by the way. Yeah.
It's true. Author was invisible.
By design, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. And did you have a particular edition that you pored over, or is this just a kind of lucky guess that this was in your childhood?
No, that was one of the books on the shelf, and something that was, I'm from Miami, and of course, there was no air conditioning when I grew up. And so these books got actually foxed, which is perfect for me with the fox and the grain.
Yeah.
Did think about that the fox was with me always, but it's foxing. They got mildew, they stayed in your home, and very few of them, only Thidwick, the big-hearted moose, was the one that escaped foxing. I can't answer why.
Okay. So forgive my perhaps botanical ignorance, but is your Miami upbringing part of why you brought coconut to the table here?
No, I think that I like feral materials, and the fox is feral, So the fox wouldn't appreciate it if I went to an art store and made the fox out of something that was purchasable. It had to be wild, and it had to be reddish because it had to have a bushy tail. So I went through my barrels of strange things I pick up when I want. And some of it just happened to be core from the way frond attaches to the coconut tree.
Well, I've heard tell of these barrels before, and I'm hoping someday to see them. It's exactly my fantasy of you, that you have a bunch of barrels of things that you find on the street, and then it turned out to be true.
It's true. It's called picking up the trash and hoping nobody notices.
That's how my parents found me, I'm told. That's what they tell me anyway. I'm not exactly sure how babies are made. Richard, to a certain extent, I'm a bit hesitant to call all of the contributions by these artists here illustrations because I don't, because for one thing, I'm married to an illustrator, and I don't understand the difference between an illustrator and an artist. And also because I think there's a certain literalism to the term illustration that seems a bit meager for a contribution to this. Richard, do you consider what you're doing here illustration, or is that a useful distinction? Are you one of those arty people who pretends not to know what I'm talking about when I say illustration art? What is it with you? What's your deal?
Yes.
I generally think of illustration as putting forth a narrative, which I don't tend to do. This project being somewhat different, and I'm doing something related to the story, so that's where I started.
Were you haunted by illustrations in particular as a child? Were there certain illustrations that...
Oh, definitely. I love great illustration. Probably, NCYS. It's a big one when I was growing up. And I had the opportunity to go to the Brandywine Museum and see his illustration, the covers of Treasure Island, books like that. And they're not little small pieces, they're big, full-scale oil paintings, and just quite amazing.
I think for me, illustration works in such a powerful way, coming from children's literature, because illustrations so often seem inevitable. So this is a great example here, when you look at the Nat and the Lion, no, you have to argue with me. Babies, man. Nothing personal. Some of us were babies, but yeah. When I look at an illustration for the Nat and the Lion, that feels inevitable to me, right? As soon as I saw that illustration, I thought, oh, of course. I think I've seen an illustration before. I think there's no other possible illustration for the Nat and the Lion. And I think that's how illustrations work often. They're presented opposite a text, and they feel inevitable. How many false starts did you have? How did you land on the Nat and on this particular take on the Nat and the Lion?
I think it came very easily because right at the beginning, although I don't claim to be the king of the jungle, but I can relate to the lion, having been in Costa Rica a number of times and laid low by mosquitoes and no-see-ums. I can relate to it. And the fact that the Nat in this case has really calmed down the lion to deliver a lecture.
Yeah.
To the lion of, here I am, and better live with it.
Yeah, I've always been drawn to this tale. It ends. We're trying not to read out loud all of the tales and morals, and they're available downstairs for your perusal, and in many other editions of Aesop all over the world. But this tale was very important to me when I was a child, because I think it's where I learned the phrase "woe is me." That I learned at a very young age, and we used a lot in our household, being raised Jewish. And I like that the Nat here is pictured so tiny against the face of the lion, which then leads inevitably to the woe is me. Sandow, do you have images from your childhood that haunted you? You seem like a haunted person based on your work.
No, but we had a copy of Aesop's Fables as well.
Yeah.
Our eighth collaborators.
Oh. Hi. We'll talk later. Sorry, go on. You were upstaged.
I had the same children's books that you mentioned, and White and Howard Pyle. Those illustrations are really influential to me. So it's not working.
Yeah, that's all.
Who would think a local theater would have to build my friends? Oh, there we go. Hi. That sounded more promising. Because your illustration or your art for the Nat and the Bull with this kind of the abstract floating in the sky to me feels like just the sort of thing that young people stare at and old people stare at for hours and hours and hours. The particular peculiar clouds, and which are not mentioned. There's flight in the story, but there's not any scene where someone is flying in the sky. And that feels like exactly the kind of inevitability to me, the kind of choice of something that isn't there, and then it's made real, and then you can't stop staring at it, and it feels like the center of the story. How did you come upon that?
Oh,
What's your deal?
you figured it out a lot more than I have. I think that the interesting thing about just going through the 8 images that they're showing up here is that about half of them deal with some very large object and some very small object.
Yeah.
And so that was the main thing that I was trying to deal with. You were talking about illustrations before, and I've done another project with them, and I don't generally think of the work that I do as being illustrations. I do images that try to tell like a parallel story to what the actual text does. But that said, coming to this project, it was more straightforward illustration.
Yeah, I mean, your work on Pooh, which people can see downstairs, is perhaps the most divisive in the press's career, because it is the stuff of nightmares. So obviously I love it, but some people apparently don't like having nightmares, and so they don't like it. But that would be an example of where you moved to an entirely different planet in certain ways from the original text.
Yeah, and I've done a similar project with the Inferno, Dante's Divine Comedy, where the images are not,
Inferno.
Yeah, where the images are not exactly like parallel to what the text is, and so
Super. Audrey, you, among so many of the artists here, participate all the time in the intersection between visual art and literature. Which is better?
I want both.
Yeah, clearly.
My husband is a comics artist, and so we're just there at the intersection all day long, grabbing everything and using it when we feel like it.
Did anybody tell you you couldn't do that, or did you naturally do that all the time?
My mother is an artist, and I was hardly ever told that I couldn't do anything art-related. I was told I couldn't do all sorts of other things, but when it came to art, she was just like, yeah, roll. And I had fantastic teachers when I was really young, and formative influences who were maybe not the greatest. I don't know, Aubrey Beardsley. I was obsessed. And the thing with Beardsley was that he was constantly taking whatever text he was given and going to some other planet with it. So,
Yeah.
salute. So yeah, just all of it, all the time.
I feel like there must also be some Beardsley in Natalie in your tutelage. Will you speak a little bit about where you stole from?
So, in general or for this?
Both.
Oh, Cantacolvitz is a favorite. Goya, Paula Rigo, big favorite. She used to tell me, you always give the viewer a way in and a way out of a drawing. It's a nice thing to do. So that's the woman turning back into a cat, chasing her mouse with her lover behind her in bed, oblivious and sleeping.
Yeah, I feel like I can hear the lover snoring.
Yeah,
because of the-
giant nose.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was a nice kind of reference to the press and Kentridge and work that I really loved that they've done. So he's another hero of mine, especially as I've worked more in other media, thinking about taking drawing and storytelling and fables and fairy tales into performance and different kinds of artistic design.
Yeah, the press has done a beautiful version of the Dares by William Kentridge, by the South African artist William Kentridge, which is really hypnotizing and terrific, as is the text. You mentioned all of these different methods that you approach. Your work is a glorious car crash of various approaches. We had the pleasure of speaking a little bit a couple nights ago on stage, and you talked about combining the wet and the dry. Will you go over that for this wet, dry audience here?
Sure. Well, this was all gouache. So gouache and water to make it move. But in my drawings, which I did for Arion's volume on Edgar Allan Poe, I used gouache and chalk pastel. And as you said, a kind of scribble layering of materiality. So you would work in gouache, you'd thin it with water, you would put pastel on top, you'd go back in with gouache and kind of incise it. So real interplay between wet and dry. But I also work with hand paper making and oil paint and projection and other media. So part of the kind of fun of drawing for me is discovering media and making it malleable.
Wonderful. And were you told that you weren't allowed to mix the wet and the dry?
I was told I was a pornographer.
Was that a compliment?
We didn't really move past that. No, I don't think it was. Now I think it is. When I was in high school, which I have a high school classmate here today, they tried to expel me for being a pornographer because I started life drawing when I was 12. And I would bring the drawings back to my school, and the head of the school's man said, "You're a pornographer, you're going to corrupt young minds." And then I got into college.
He told a 12-year-old that the 12-year-old was going to corrupt young minds.
Yeah.
How young was it?
Evidently just the boys. And then I got into college, and this went on for 6 years. And he said, "Well, you've brought honor into the school by getting into this college, so you can do nude self-portraits and nude women, but no nude men." So at that time I was 18, 17, so telling a 17-year-old they could do nude portraits of themselves to bring to school was...
Yeah, no, of course. What a nice man to tell you.
Lovely, lovely.
Richard, where were you first corrupted?
This corrupted, I think probably when I was in the 7th grade, I sold in newspapers at the Disney studios. And I had grown with it a lot and would go through the animation building, the illustration building, and I could see the work being done, talk to the people, and give me a lot of insights into, and a lot of it in terms of illustration, certainly, and the storytelling that they were doing.
Because so many, there's such a wide and diverse approach in all of the artists who are on stage today. But one thing that it seems to me that is a thread that's running through all of your work is that you all appear to be doing things that I know so many artists are told not to do. And that was, I guess, just an angle that occurred to me. And Michele, what's the things you were told not to do?
And not to do narratives.
Narratives.
Yeah, there's no narrative.
Wait, get out of my lane.
Sorry, narratives. That's what I was told by my faculty. No humor, and definitely no politics. But I do all of the opposite, and so I'm happy with it.
Right. Politics, humor, narrative, things that are definitely kept out of art.
I can help myself. I studied political economy in Mexico, and then when I moved here, the School of Economics was really boring. And I decided to switch. And luckily, I was able to do that.
Economics, law, was artistic scan, I guess, as always. I guess my next question is for the surprise guest. Is red the best color of car? I think it is. Yeah, you like a red car?
A red car?
Yeah. Or you, Enrique. Sure. I got distracted by the car.
Okay, sorry. But no, I want to hear your question because I think I misunderstood this.
Joe, I was talking to a child. So. But now I'm going to talk about child's mother. I love this illustration for the Wolf and the Crane, and I'm curious, first of all, just how, it is so startling, it is so beautiful, and it has that inevitability. I don't think I'll ever be able to look at the Wolf and the Crane. In fact, this was one of the first illustrations that I saw, and I went and looked at my subtly, tediously illustrated editions of the Wolf and the Crane that I had for preparation with this project. How did this strike you?
So in my own work, I've been very interested in shadows lately. And when I was invited to work on this project, it was, I think, in part thinking about how I might read or enact or animate a fable now having this young child. But you mentioned the other night, touched on, that imagining around who Aesop was. And given the possibility that he might have been from Africa, a former slave or a slave, enslaved person, I wanted to sort of tap into beyond the page, like how are stories passed on and thinking about oral traditions. And so this idea of doing like a shadow puppet kind of storytelling, I tried a bunch of different things. I folded origami forms, and then we settled on, I settled on doing this hand puppet thing. So I photographed my hands making these shapes with the crane. I needed a little bit of an extension for his.
Yeah, because I've seen your thumbs.
Not quite get to that shovable point, but so it became a sort of boiling it down to a kind of basic thing of sort of shadows, like this shadow thing.
I have a quick question. Actually, this is pressure printing.
It is, yeah.
Have you done it before?
I have not. And what I produced was the photograph of my shadows. And Blake and his very capable team came up with a suggestion of trying it as picture print.
I just wanted to say that I've seen this technique demonstrated over and over again in print classes. I've never seen anybody do anything with it. This is a masterpiece.
And Audrey, everyone obviously in the room knows exactly what you're talking about, but in case somebody doesn't, will you explain a little bit about what kind of printing?
Okay, you want to talk a little bit about how it's made?
Sure. So basically the stencil was cut in the shape of the two hand shapes. Sweet. Thank you. And a bullet forming. Okay, just a little like that. And then a plate is put down on the press. The paper, the stencil goes on the back side of the paper, cracking. Essentially, against the drum. And the plate is so because there's a stencil, there's more pressure, so more ink is released. And so where the stencil was, the ink is darker than everywhere else.
Yeah, it's just one of those techniques that I've always longed to see somebody really use it. So kudos to you all. Just a really cool thing.
This brings up something that I'm interested in as well. I'm always grateful as a writer to work in a medium that's so easily reproduced. The most wondrous of writing can be found in the cheapest of editions, and still even though a gorgeous book is always well worth the time and an ugly book is always a shame, that the meaning of literature is still almost entirely conveyed identically in reproduction. So many, and then here we have a kind of different perspective where on one hand we have a limited edition of an incredibly beautiful book. I think when you go downstairs and look at it, as you look at what every book that this press has produced, you can't help but decide that every book should look like this, and all of the shabby books that you have at home are shame. But I'm curious how other artists see the balance between wanting to have your work reproduced so people can see it and wanting to have it as beautiful as possible, because that, sadly, is often the choice here on Planet Earth. Michele, you take it.
Okay.
Try to get a little lost here in this code.
It's such an interesting question, because they say that books are dead, nobody's reading, but the truth is there's a hungry market for the book as an object, which has always been what the book was. You go back, the covers became an art form, binding became an art form, paper. There's such a new appreciation for the book as something to hold and to look at, and that's just delicious. So I think the book is an object. It deserves to have the ability And what is going away are the mass-produced books that you think people are ashamed to have at home.
That's lovely. How do other people stand out where you want us?
Well, I would agree with you. My normal way of working is painting, which is like the worst way to communicate. I start off a project like really having this thing I want to say, and then I do a painting of it, and then so few people get to see it. But I know that when I start. I mean, I knew that when I became a painter. So my whole desire is to get as many people to see it as possible, and often that means like getting in cheap reproductions in a magazine or something. So that seems the normal way, and to have the opportunity to come and do something really fantastic where with the craft and everything is a treat.
It's a treat to hear you describe any aspect of your work as the normal way. It's like illuminating for me. All right, we're gonna turn it over to the audience for questions in a moment, but I have one last question. It is a question that I asked Natalie Frank and Barry Mosier on stage a couple of nights ago. And Natalie gave a pretty good answer, very basically refused, which is he's illustrated 400 books. He doesn't have to talk to me if he doesn't want to. I'm going to direct it at Enrique, but I hope everyone chimes in. Enrique, we live in a world increasingly teetering over a pit of despair. Everything is broken, everything is wrong, everything is irritating, and it feels as if we are frantically struggling against a current and an ocean filled with hungry, poisonous eels. Can making things, drawings and stories and books and design save ourselves and the world we're stuck in? If yes, how? And if no, wrong answer.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for the question.
Save the world for us.
Yes. I think especially books are very subversive today, and there's so much about it in different places, depending on the context. Any book that can be totally ignored in one context becomes forbidden in another context. And that's always interesting to me. I began to get interested in books since I learned about the destruction of the Colombian libraries in Mexico City during the conquest. The library of Texcoco, which I always talk about, had thousands of Aztec books that were burned between 2019 and 2021. And only one book survived, that is at the Biblioteca Nacional in Aren's Codex Borbonicus. Everything else was burned. There was a mass suicide of indigenous people when they saw the library destroyed. For 300 years, in the colonial times, indigenous peoples could not have access to paper as to do their books. So, I mean, that tells you the power of books. All of that survived. Thankfully, few books survived. We have these 4 Mayan books, 3 Europe and Mexico, about 19 books from the Oaxaca region, and this is pre-Columbian. There's like hundreds of Aztec books, but done after the conquest. Different story. So when I got into books, I began to do hand-painted codices, and then eventually they got it to main lithographs. And I love to use work with visual language. And in that sense, the illustration I did for the Aesop Fables, it's a sentence between the powerful and the powerless through the differences of lines. Thick lines, but super fine line, and equally powerful in the story. So that's the part I think it could be thought-provoking. Eventually, even if people might get offended by some literature, the thought-provoking creates circumstances for change. And so we need to do something beyond just art, of course, because I wish we could change the world with just art, because that will do it. We need to vote, we need to have a civic life. But other than that, I'm sorry, it's a really long answer.
No, it's a really cool answer. And I think that there's so much in the fables about the powerful and the powerless, and so often the previous incarnations of the morals tried to keep the status quo even in a story that begged you not to. And so
It's like speaking truth to power in this case.
yeah, but I'm always reminded of Noam Chomsky, who said, I don't know why you're speaking truth to power. Power already knows the truth. Speak truth to people who are powerless, and they can tell the power what to do about it. I'll open up to questions now, and then Michele and I can't forget our secret finale. No, so we can't forget, because I might forget. You won't forget? All right, look, I'm unreliable. If you have a question, indicate it by shouting deafeningly. No, just kidding. Raise your hands, and then we'll call on you. And there's someone who has agreed to run all over the auditorium for the rest of the afternoon.
What is the font you are using?
What is the
typeset?
what is the font you're using? I think that's for Blake.
Type it Bulmer. I don't know. And catch me afterwards. I'll talk your ear off about it.
Yeah, it is asking you out on a date as long as he's able to speak about fonts. Yes, there's someone down here. Run!
I'd like to know, thank you so much for this presentation today. It's been very delightful. Being a lunch hour, it's quite delicious. Thank you. I would like to know your process of developing the morals. And there.
Oh, the process of developing the morals. Well, there was a solitary process, which was reading a bunch of editions of Aesop. I had the luck of being asked to do this project when I happened, thank you for giving me the opportunity to brag, I happened to have a fellowship at Oxford University where they have a couple of copies of Aesop's Fables lying around the libraries. And so I tried to lay those out next to each other and look up how the morals have been done. There were very small editions of Aesop's Fables that were for very particular morals. There's a Marxist one, there's a Freudian one. But what I liked thinking about was that the moral tells you more about the person writing the moral than it says anything about the story. The stories are all bewildering. I think the reason why they have survived is like all very old literature that has survived, it is deeply strange. And that there is a lot of supposedly modern thinking about how stories survive. There's a lot of thought about, oh, it's the hero's journey, for instance. Everyone loves the hero's journey. I don't think that's accurate. I think that stories survive because of their bewildering premise. And that when you're young, you know nothing about the world. The world is super confusing to you. Your mom's up on a stage, and why don't you get to see her? It doesn't make any sense. And that stories present you with an idea that something crazy is happening almost all of the time. And I think that is comforting when the world is crazy. Once upon a time, it was a king, and the king had a daughter who would not smile, and so the king decided to have a contest, and whoever made her smile got to marry her. Every part of that is insane. Every single part, including a king. Already that's crazy. Yeah. And so when you read a story like that, or have it read to you more likely when you were a child, you begin to grasp how crazy the world is, and that it's always been crazy, and that helps you situate yourself. And so I tried to write morals that pointed out how crazy the story was, because that's the prism through which I'm looking at it, is how deeply crazy it is, rather than, say, a Freudian lesson that is some of the bangers that other people try to do. So that was my process. And then there was a great deal of collaborations with the press on it, and so that was really fun too. I'd come over and we'd drink some iced coffee, and we'd get all hyped up, and we'd talk about 50 other books that we enjoyed, and we'd tell stories about how we first encountered those books, and then we'd say, oh my god, look at the time, we forgot to talk about the morals, and we talked about the morals really quickly, and then we'd talk about it with somebody else, and then I'd go home and say to my wife, we spent all the time arguing about it, and she'd say, actually, I have been arguing with you too, and I would spiral out of control, and eventually we got it done. That's my bathroom. Someone else?
Do you think you worked your hardest on the art?
Oh, that's a great question. Do you think you worked hardest on your art? Who should we ask? Let's ask Natalie. Natalie, how hard did you work?
Pretty hard.
Pretty hard. So in her case, the answer is no. Who would say they worked medium hard on it? Like Natalie. Who would say they worked really hard? Who would say they hardly worked at all? And who's in the throes of motherhood who can't even possibly answer? We won't ask her to raise her hand because her hands are full. Yeah, so I guess some people worked medium hard, some people worked really hard, but most people who say they're working really hard are really only working medium hard.
I'm sure.
I worked super hard. Really, really hard. There's no harder job than mine. Ask any ER nurse. She'll say, gosh, I'm so glad I don't write for children. That's a much more difficult job than stopping this bleeding. Who's next?
Right here. Sorry. My question is about collaboration. As for the illustrators who are working on this, was the collaboration for you possibly with Aesop, the text itself, the press, or maybe your childhood self? It's an open question.
Oh, I like that.
It was definitely with the press because I wanted to make something that wasn't, and he said, that it was hard to express something that was really going to be a fox. So I brought it to Blake very early on, and he said, "What?"
Will you show it, Blake? People have seen it. Will you just change that?
Yeah. Blake said, "This is a sculpture. You're asking me to make it flat." So then I took out a pencil and I explained how he could do it as a lithograph with many stones, which of course was an impossible request. But we somehow managed because he has a great sense of humor. And he was a lovely human being, so I had to figure out a way to get it done without tormenting him any further.
You succeed.
I think for me it was reading Aesop, finding a great amount of joy in this woman who used to be a cat, who's now hanging out with her lover and is being tested. And then the collaboration with the press has always been pretty much the highlight of the process. I work a lot alone in my studio working from literature, so that can get pretty solitary. But working with Blake and figuring out how to foil the eyes and put it all together and have the mouse running out of the frame and the proportions, and then being really excited when I showed up and had suggested gold foil but got rainbow satanic foil. I was really thrilled, which is kind of Arion's thing. They always surprise you and they find the most creative solution to something.
Yeah, and rainbow satanic foil is pretty standard in San Francisco.
I'm from New York.
That's just how we roll.
I'm from New York.
I just want to say that sometimes you go with an idea here and it doesn't work, and the press and Blake especially really makes it possible. Sometimes it's a challenge. I think that for the book for Pedro Páramo, is a book that has a lot of cost. I did a design that was very challenging, and you really didn't know how to. I didn't know if it was possible to print in both sides of a single piece of paper that would have to be very transparent. And in one side, you will see a solid part of, let's say, a person, and the other side, behind the paper, you will see the ghost of a room. But when you turn the page, it switch. So you see the ghost of a person, and the room will look very sharp. You have to think backwards to print both sides because so I have to make two different transparencies, if I recall. And that had never, as far as I know, had not been done with the press. And I hope we didn't develop into a migraine or something because it was a lot of back and forth. I remember at some point they told me that maybe it's not going to happen, but it happened. And I was really amazed. And at the end, I don't know, I think the collaborations are when nobody knows what's going to look like. So want to go afterwards. To me, at least, maybe the best collaboration. So that collaboration maybe are very straightforward and everything goes exactly as planned, but not in my case. And I hope it was not too much of a torture.
I'm so glad you brought up that edition too. I don't think it's displayed currently downstairs, but it is. It's just Pedro Palomar is a marvelous wonder of a text, and Enrique's illustrations are really hot, really bring the ghost. I was also a book that I encountered. I read a kind of crappy edition of Pedro Palomar, but the text was calling to me. And then I was at someone's house who owned the beautiful edition with Enrique's illustrations, and I remember just staring at it. And that the whole novel crystallized for me in the way that it was designed together. Really a magical thing. Davis, while you were presumably taking shut the mouth of your child, the last question was asking about collaboration and if who you might feel yourself in collaboration with. Are you in collaboration with the text? Are you in collaboration with your childhood self, with the press, with the material? When you think about this as a collaboration, is there something that comes to mind?
Yes, really all of the above. It's all those things coming together. I have a background in printmaking and doing letterpress, but the opportunity to work here where it's less focused on resolving technical things myself, so I can devote my attention to the idea, which is very much the case with this. It's so kind of ethereal, and so to point them in this direction and then figure what's the best way to do it that gives it that quality, which I appreciate you noting. It's all really exciting, and of course, having a young child and sort of thinking through that kind of encounter of these stories and trying to recall how I encountered Aesop's Fables. And all of those things came into play and thinking about what this collaboration will look like.
I think your illustration here is so perfect when thinking not just about the tale, but about Aesop in general, that it is, it's haunting, but it's also gone, but it stays with you. Your hand is no longer in that position. The action that caused the shadow is long, is not maintained, but it has left this trace that is mysterious and elusive, but definitely there. It's just a beautiful way to think about it. And speaking of surprising connections, Michele and I learned backstage moments before coming on here that we both keep in our wallets scraps of paper with bits of literature that we enjoy. This felt like a delightful connection. Do you have your scrap?
Here, please, correct.
All right. So we're going to read out loud two things that we both like. Michele, you can go first.
Thank you.
You could take one of those two microphones right near you. That might work.
This is from Their Eyes Were Watching God, Zora Neale Hurston, and this is the one that's so sweet, the ending. She pulled in her horizon like a great fish net, pulled it from around the waist of the world, and draped it over her shoulder. So much of life was in its meshes. She called in her soul to come and see.
That's terrific. And this is, I think, yours was more hopeful, so maybe we should have gotten this one. Nevertheless, this is where it's landed. This is from Sarah Jean Alexander. I will read it and then we will all go downstairs. It's called Minute Lengthening of the Day. Ocean waves late at night seem like one element trying to secretly steal from another. Before you fall asleep, remember, literally nothing you do matters. I am sorry if you expected something differently about this world. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out. Give it up for all the wonderful artists here.
Look at you. This one doesn't. Those like right hands. That. We're gonna go back. Honestly, that's true.
Yeah.
One of my skills, we're going to see no, let's just go.
I'm just like, I do that.